Okay, so we're looking at John chapter 4 today. So we're sort of skipping around the Gospel of John a little bit, but as we see on the screen, this is about the sevens. And what we're doing with the seven miracles is we're kind of pairing them up with the seven I am statements. And so what we did the last two times was we had the miracle of the turning water into wine, and then that was paired up with Jesus saying, "I am the true vine." And so we covered that last week. So this week we're doing the healing of the nobleman's son. And so that is the second sign, and the Bible is very, very clear, as we'll read, that this is the second sign. Okay, so John doesn't leave much to the imagination when it comes to these sorts of things. So, and then this will be paired up next week with the I am statement that says, "I'm the way, the truth, and the life." So, so we'll look at that. But so this is a rather short thing, but it is a very significant incident. And again, the more that you delve into what's going on, there's a lot of detail there. There's a lot of really great truth to be had. So let's see if we're right here. There we go. Okay, it's great to have technology that works. Just when it don't work. So anyway, there is a little fund that has been started for replacing that puppy there. So if anybody's interested in contributing, because that boy is starting to get so. Okay, so it's John chapter 4, verse 46 through 54. So it says, "So Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made the water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. And when he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and implored him to come down and heal his son, for he was at the point of death. And then Jesus said to him, 'Unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe.' And the nobleman said to him, 'Sir, come down before my child dies.' And Jesus said to him, 'Go your way, your son lives.' So the man believed the word that Jesus spoke to him, and he went his way. And as he was going down, his servants met him and told him, saying, 'Your son lives.' And then he inquired of them the hour when he got better. And they said to him, 'Yesterday, at the 7th hour, the fever left him.' So the father knew that it was at the same hour in which Jesus said to him, 'Your son lives.' And he himself believed, and his whole household. And this is the second sign Jesus did when he had come out of Judea into Galilee." So now the distance in terms of literary space that there is between chapter 4 and chapter 2, where the thing with the water into wine, where Jesus had turned the water into wine, as it says up there, was in Cana. Okay, it was at that wedding. And so this is in the region of Galilee. And we'll pull a map up here in a second to show you where this is, because I think understanding geography is useful. But then you have the meeting with Nicodemus. Okay, now that's is down in Jerusalem. Okay, so that's down in Judea, south, way south. And then as Jesus is journeying back up, so he's going from Cana, in chapter 2 of John, and going down south, having this meeting with Nicodemus and John the Baptist and different things that are going on. And then he's coming back up. And then in chapter 4, he is then meeting up with the woman at the well. Okay, so the woman at the well is in Samaria. So, and as the Bible says that he had to go through Samaria. Now, a lot of Jews back then avoided Samaria, because Samaria people in the Jews' minds were half-breeds. They were, ethnically just undesirable people. But Jesus needs must went into Sychar, which was one of the towns in Samaria there, in order to see the woman at the well. And so there was this big conversation. And a lot of things to learn from there, but we might go there at some point. But so Jesus has this conversation, and the people there then believed because of the woman at the well, what she said. And so then men and people came and heard then Jesus testify himself, and then they believed, because of the word that Jesus spoke. So it's right after this that then Jesus is still coming north a bit into the region of Galilee. So let's just get a bit of geography here. Okay, so now I'm going to zoom in on this map, but if you can see Galilee there with a little red thing. Again, what we've discovered about the Sea of Galilee is it's about the same size as Loch Ness. All right, in the middle of our wonderful province. So, how many people have actually seen Loch Ness? Okay, so
I've been on a boat around it.
oh, you've been on. Oh, goody. So, all right, but
Years ago when I was younger.
but it's amazing how many people I've actually encountered in Northern Ireland that go, "What is that?" So Loch Ness is the largest freshwater lake in Europe.
But the boat goes from Antrim, goes around the lake.
I haven't been Loch Ness, but I have been on Galilee.
So has anybody ever at the eels that they produce out of these things? There's oily things. Anyway, so so just south, if you see Decapolis there, just kind of below the Sea of Galilee, that's where it was in that region is where the man of Gadara was healed, the guy that had the legion of demons. So he was actually just on that south coast there. And then way below this is the Dead Sea, and Judea is down south. So it's off the map here. So, but to give you, we'll zoom in on this. Okay, so now we have the Sea of Galilee, and we'll just say, okay, there's Cana. All right. So now, when you look at the map and you're not sure about the scale, you go, oh, that looks far away. All right, because we also have Capernaum here, which is where this nobleman is coming from. All right, so again, looks like a bit of a distance. It's about 16 miles. Now, to put it in terms that all of us understand here in Northern Ireland, it's like driving from here to Lisburn. So that's the distance between Capernaum and Cana, is like going to Lisburn. So it's not terribly far. Now, the thing you need to realize, so they didn't have cars back then. So 90% of people walked. Some people had access to donkeys or horses, which made the trip a little shorter. But if you were to walk that distance, even if it's just kind of if it's a fast enough pace, but not killing yourself, it would probably take you between 4 and 5 hours. So it's really not that far of a thing. Now, the reason I'm talking about all of this is because in the conversation, remember it says yesterday about the 7th hour. So you sort of put this together and you go, why is it that long? Because you would have thought that your guy would have heard what Jesus had to say and hoofed it back to Capernaum. Now the nobleman, the reason he is called a nobleman is because he is in the court of Herod, one of the not Herod the Great, that was the king that was in power at the time of Jesus, but he had a bunch of sons. Okay, so this was one of the other sons. You might know Sam. Was it Herod Antipas or? It wasn't Herod Agrippa. It would have been Agrippa, but it would have been Antipas, I think. So, but anyway, it was one of the Herod sons, part of the Herod dynasty. So the nobleman would have been an official that was in the court of this particular man. So he was a political operator. Okay, so involved in the local government, and would have had probably a fair bit of prestige and power and all those kinds of things. So he's not just a common man. So anyway, that's just to give you a bit of geography. You can see down below there Nazareth in the map there, just at the end of the little purple thing, and that's where Jesus grew up. I would say that is about 20 miles from Capernaum. Okay, and then you see Nain down below there, and Jesus actually walked from Capernaum down to Nain, again about 20 miles. And so now I have walked, the farthest I've walked in a day is about 17 miles, and I did that down south one time, and that took me the guts of an afternoon. So that was from about 1 o'clock to about 5 o'clock. So walking about the east coast of Ireland from Bray down to Wicklow. So I walked that path one time. So it's hard. A lot of those on the beach
between Nazareth and Galilee. Between Nazareth and Capernaum.
Yeah.
And it's just a wee windy track in between two big.
Yeah. So it's not straight. Wouldn't necessarily because it would have been rough enough. Okay, so now we'll look at so we have a picture up here of Jesus talking to the nobleman. But what I want to look at, as I do with a lot of these kinds of studies, is look at the actions. Look at what's going on, because if you know what's going on and you can build the picture, then you can see more what's happening. So the first person that is doing something in this story is Jesus himself, so what he is then going to do is he came again into Cana. So Cana was the place where he had the first miracle, and then he went, did a bunch of stuff, and he comes up again. So, but I like this word came, because could you imagine if Jesus never came? What if Jesus never came to this earth? It wouldn't bear thinking about. But Jesus came, and I think it's a wonderful thing just a devotional thing to think about, is that Jesus came to this place in order to deal with us as individuals, because he loves us. And so here he comes again, up to Cana, and I would imagine while he was there, probably had a bit of chat with the couple that was married, and just some other people and that kind of thing. I would imagine that Jesus was a very socially engaging person, but very personable.
If he goes somewhere, he's there for a purpose. He's went
Yes.
to do something.
Yeah. He's not just diving off the motorway there to go to McDonald's for a quick burger. That's not the kind of thing. So this is where Jesus is, and this is the thing that he is doing here. He came to this particular place. And then the next person that is mentioned as we sort of ping pong through this thing is the nobleman, in terms of what he's doing. And so he heard. Okay, so it says here, so Jesus came again to Cana of Galilee, where he had made water wine. And there was a certain nobleman whose son was sick at Capernaum. And when he heard that Jesus had come out of Judea into Galilee, he went to him and so on. So this man hears, all right? And as I thought about this, hearing is a little different than listening. Okay, listening is an active thing. Hearing something is just passive. So, but you have to be, as I said here, sensitive to hearing the right things. So, so God by his Spirit, you know, I believe is working in this man and having him switched on so that he hears then that Jesus is nearby. Now, it's not really that nearby, but obviously he has a situation and he has a circumstance, and because of his position, probably has ability then to get down to Jesus fairly quickly. I would say that this guy had access to horses. So this is not going to take him 4 and 5 hours to get there. It might take him an hour and a half, or maybe 2. So it's so there is an urgency, you know. So, but he hears, you know, and I think it's very, very important that we be in a position where we're hearing from God. So, because we can get caught up in all the noise of everybody else and you know what everybody is saying to us about certain things, but it's wonderful that when the Spirit comes and wants to engage with you, he gets you to hear to the exclusion of the other noise. So, and then this is what he does actively, is he then went to Jesus. So based on what he hears, he goes. And then when he gets there, he implored because of the gravity of the situation. You know, this idea of imploring is really falling down at one's feet and just going, please do something about this, and I am not going anywhere until it gets sorted. And so there's a great love that the nobleman has for his son, and he is desperately concerned about him, and knows that Jesus can do something. Now, it's interesting to think that if this is the second miracle, or the second sign that that is recorded in the Gospel of John, how is it that you know, this man hears about Jesus? You know, was there other things that went on? Well, the answer to that is yes. So there's loads of other things that Jesus has done and has, you know, in terms of miracles and different things. So there is a reputation that Jesus has that he hears about. But again, what John is doing is he's selecting these particular things out so that when they are read, people believe.
It's to be, even though the nobleman had an understanding of belief, knowing that if he went to Jesus, he could do something.
Yeah. Yes.
So he must have believed himself.
Yeah, and sometimes your circumstances drive that.
Yeah.
You know, you're desperate to grab something, but he knew. I would imagine that he did the normal things of trying to get his son sorted out up in Capernaum. Capernaum was a fairly busy place, so there would have been quite a lot of people there that were probably able to offer some kind of help. You know, medical practitioners of various sorts of descriptions, you know, whether they were quacks or whatever, I don't know, but, you know, I imagine there would be some well-meaning people up there that had some ability, but obviously they couldn't do anything. So
that would lead to him having the, you know, because if you had a son and you had the money to get people who could maybe do something for him, and you saw that didn't work. Yeah. But then you went to Jesus and it did work. Yeah. Then you realize this man can do more than all these other people are supposed to be. Yeah, put together. Professionals. Yeah. And they can do nothing. So that would really boost your. Yeah. So, you know, and that is, and you see that in the scriptures, especially with the woman with the issue of blood, because it says that she spent all that she had with physicians and got them better.
Sure.
But so.
Oh, sorry. Woody.
Yeah, go ahead.
Something. See the wedding at Cana. According to scriptures, that was Jesus' first recorded miracle. Is it possible Mary saw him doing something that she knew he would have the capability of turning the water into wine, and this is why she asked him to act at that particular time.
And trying to pick up all what you're saying there. It's
just that up to that point he hadn't performed any miracles.
well, yeah. Now, what you have to understand is what as we talked about, and maybe you weren't at that particular study, but we talked about the difference between a miracle and a sign, and all the things that are highlighted in the Gospel of John is what's referred to as a sign. And so it was a miracle that had an overarching spiritual meaning. So it wasn't just a demonstration of power.
Oh yeah.
So John says this was the first sign. So this is for John, this was like the start of the miracles that had particular spiritual meaning. Whereas probably there were miracles. I would say Jesus had done probably maybe a number of things prior to that, but this was John highlighting. No, this wasn't just a miracle. This was a sign in order to point to the spiritual office that Jesus was holding, which was that people might believe and that they would have life through his name. Because the whole thing with the turning water into wine is that Jesus is the author of life. That's why we said that he didn't produce any alcohol through that, because alcohol was a death process.
Yeah.
So, okay. Right. So now back to Jesus here, and what he is then doing is he then makes a statement. Okay, so he says, unless you people see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Now, that sounds a bit in your face at the time. Here's this man who really is quite distraught. I would say that this man was quite emotionally distraught about the situation. And then you have Jesus interjecting this thing about look, unless you people see signs and wonders, I mean, you're not going to believe. I mean, come on, so but Jesus, and you might notice if you have a King James or a New King James Bible, it says, unless you people, okay, people is in italics, which means it's not in the original Greek. So it says, unless you see signs and wonders, you will by no means believe. Now, the reason the word people is inserted there is because you could have a you singular, and you could also have a you plural. So this is to emphasize that this is not you singular. So Jesus is not talking to this man singularly and pointing out to him and saying, unless you as an individual see signs. So he's not singling him out. He's just, there's probably all kinds of other people all standing around. This is what happens, so it's you plural. So that's why it's you people. Okay. So, so he makes this statement, but so Jesus' intention really is to expose potential motive. The reason you people are down here is to go and see a neat show as a curiosity. But Jesus is not into people coming and going, ooh, boy, isn't that neat? Well, that's really something cool. That's what say, cool. Crazy. But it's interesting then what the nobleman then does. So we'll see that next here, which is he then has his true motive stated. My son needs healing, because he really doesn't he doesn't react badly to the statement of Jesus, he just says, the nobleman said to him, "Sir, come down before my child dies." So, so he states pretty clearly, "Lord, this is not about signs and wonders. You get, I'm coming down here because it's a curiosity exercise, or I'm kind of want to see a trick." That's not what this man's about. This man has a bona fide need, and so Jesus is demonstrating that this is valid. This is true.
And the nobleman didn't come to see if he could heal my son.
Yeah.
He had confidence.
Yes.
Jesus could.
Yes.
heal
So
his son.
yeah, and it's pretty cut and dry. It says,
Yeah.
"Sir, come down before my child dies." So he knew that this is last chance saloon. This is the last option. So
Must have had a good belief because get on a horse and go to the farmhouse.
yeah,
The effort, like, to leave the dance. So,
yes,
as a mum,
yeah,
you get in the car and drive for an hour and a half.
yeah,
Knowing that you're going to miss.
Ah,
yes. Your son might die.
So you leave your child and go.
Yeah,
So you must have had a good belief.
yes. So
But strong enough to get in there.
yeah. So and that wasn't just sheer curiosity. So that this was a driven thing.
An hour and a half of horse.
Oh, I'm sure you would know that. Yeah, dust and
Yeah.
all sorts of. So,
And then when you got there after the hour and a half,
yeah,
to get back or to
Yes,
get,
it's true.
Yeah.
It's hard
you
work.
rested an hour and a half. maybe.
yeah. So
You
so.
really need to do
So,
something.
when you start painting this picture, you can sort of see the emotions and see what's going on, people gathered
Quite
around.
intense.
Yeah, it is, it's very, very intense. A lot of drama here, so. Now, Jesus then says this, he says, he made a life-changing and life-altering statement. Your son lives. I mean, can you imagine this? That, because what the nobleman is actually coming to get Jesus to do is to come with him to go and see his son. That is his sort of limited human sort of understanding. See, up to this point, this would be sort of the first time that we've heard something where Jesus speaks a word and something happens. So now some people confuse this story with the centurion's servant. Okay, the centurion came and said to Jesus about his servant being sick, and the servant understood. He says, "Jesus, you don't need to come to actually heal my servant. You just speak the word and my servant will be healed." And that is the one of two times where Jesus marveled in the Bible. He marveled. He says, "I have never seen faith like this in all of Israel." Because the centurion understood the power of command.
yeah.
So Jesus could command, and the guy could have been on the other side of the planet, and it still would have worked.
You're talking about the faith that he had.
Yeah.
When you look back at the one where Jesus was into the synagogue on the Sabbath day and the man was over their hand, and it talks about the people were enemies of Jesus.
Yeah.
They didn't go in, they didn't wonder, will he heal the boy?
Uh-huh.
They were there to see him heal the boy and then say to him, "What are you doing that for on the Sabbath?"
Mhm.
Even though they didn't want anything to do with him,
Yeah.
they realized that
Yeah.
he has the power to do this.
Yeah. But it's interesting, in Nazareth, the other time that Jesus marveled in the Bible was at the unbelief of the Nazarenes. That's the only two times in the Bible that you'll find where Jesus marveled at something. And one was at the centurion's servant, that whole situation. And then the other time was at Nazareth, where he was marveling at their unbelief. So, anyway. But here's this 3 words that is articulated by the Lord Jesus Christ, changes everything. And I don't know if you've ever had an experience where you've heard something, somebody say something, and you felt either a great amount of relief, or you felt really, really wiped out as soon as you heard something, you know, and you know, I've been in that, you know, circumstance where, you know, somebody came up to me and says, such and such happened, or made a statement about me. And that's just like guts at me. You just want to go and crawl under a rock and go away. And then there's other times where something's said, you know, it could be a medical thing. Say that you're you know, you're so concerned, you know, about, you know, some diagnosis, and then the doctor says, just to let you know, it's okay. The test is
I had
negative.
that one time when I was in pain and I went and had a foreign meal examination, and the guy said to me, I'm sorry to tell you, you have an ulcer. And I thought to myself, brilliant.
Yeah.
He says, I never saw anybody that ever said brilliant, because
Yeah.
I was thinking it was something else.
Was
Yeah.
really,
Yeah.
And that was a real.
Yeah, because I remember when I moved to Ireland the second time back in '98. I told the story before when Butcher the whole thing, but I had this left gland in my neck that went ballistic, you know, and you know, and it was flagging up cancer and, you know, all manner of things. And you know, and I remember when about a month into the bargain, the doctor's secretary phoned me up and says, Mr. Price, have good news, it's not malignant.
Yeah.
But then she followed that statement up with, but.
Yeah.
And so, but, you know, and anyway, it turned out to be a really bad bout of glandular fever, you know, that I had. But, you know, there is something about words. Words are powerful, you know, and we have to watch our words and make sure that they are crafted in a sense carefully, you know. And so when Jesus Christ says things, you know, I like Bibles that have read the words of Christ are read, you know, because it's important, you know, what Christ says has life in it, you know. And so in fact, that statement there is repeated 3 times in this passage. Your son lives. That's how important this is, you know. So that's why I say it's a life-changing and it's a life-altering. So now, this is where this statement goes, because now we have the nobleman, and his immediate response to this is belief. Okay, so it's not relief, but it's belief. That's what this book's about. This book is about believing on Jesus. So so he believes the word that Jesus spoke. But what a great 3 words that were sown into his life. Your son lives.
and he believed instantly, because he could have said, well, I go home and see what it's like.
Go and check it out. But yeah, John is very, very deliberate in making sure that the response here is belief. That is the first thing that is there.
You know, in verse 28 it says, Jesus says, unless you see signs and wonders at this stage,
Yeah,
no man hasn't seen any signs or wonders. Yeah. He believed.
yeah, that's right. Yeah. So because he as far as we know up to this time, Jesus hadn't been up to Capernaum yet. You know, so but anyway, but obviously the notoriety of Jesus had been there, because he heard Jesus was there, so he was going down to get this sorted. But so then the next thing is that he went his way home, but he took his time because of the release of the burden in his soul.
completely different journey going home.
Yeah,
than
so this man has hoofed it down from Capernaum down to Cana, probably, if he walked it 4 or 5 hours, if he was on a horse, an hour and a half or whatever. And the reason I know this is because when he meets up with your people later on, he says, when did this happen? And they said about the 7th hour, yesterday.
Yeah.
And then he knew it was, so the guy spent the night, so that, now, if I was, taking the car to Lisburn and coming back, I mean, now, where this could be a potential issue culturally in our day and age is if you go to the Isle of Man, because it's an island, people have very island mentality there. And I remember being in Douglas, which is the capital of the Isle of Man. The Isle of Man is not big, okay? The Isle of Man is 12 miles wide, and it's about 30 miles long. I've flown over it, and I saw the whole thing, so it's not big. And there's 90,000 people who live on the island or something. But anyway, I remember saying to a guy in Douglas, I says, look, I'm going up to Ramsey, which is maybe 6 miles up north of Douglas, to go and see somebody. And the man in Douglas says to me, oh, are you spending the night?
Yeah.
Spend the night? Why would I go and spend the night at some place that's 5 miles away? I mean, we're talking about some place that's like, as far as Drumore.
Yeah.
And you go, oh dear, I'm going to spend the night. It's far.
It's all to do with.
Yeah.
Somebody in Australia would go there for a coffee.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, now we're talking about, something that's a little bit farther. It's a little bit more of an effort. But, if I was the boy's father, and I was concerned about my son, I would be legging it back to Capernaum.
Yeah.
But he spends the night because he has experienced release of the burden in his own soul. No. So he believed, and then he made his way back home. And could you imagine the man at night? He's lying on the bed, probably didn't sleep all that well, I would say. But I think initially, probably it's almost like having a cup of coffee. At the Stars meeting last night, I had a cup of coffee, and then I went home to go to bed, and I was kind of pie-eyed for a while. But anyway, this is what happens. But I could imagine him rehearsing this line that Jesus says, "Go your way, your son lives." Go your way, your son lives. And that rested with him, and it disabled all the nonsense and the argy-bargy and the drama and all that stuff. He just rested with that and then went to sleep, saying, my son lives. So now there's the service now. So it's amazing when you stop and sort of go slowly through these things, which you pick up. Well, they met the man, okay? So because something happened, with the son, and it happened quite dramatically, apparently, I would say. So they're all legging it down to Cana because they know your man was going down there to go and see Jesus. So they're on their way. But you got to remember this, happened the day before. So, and so they said the same thing Jesus says. So they come down, they say, your son lives. Can you imagine the connection of what Jesus says and then what they say? It's the same.
Most of it spoke also to the servants.
Uh-huh.
Like that would have been just went right round.
Well, yes, I would say eventually, yeah. So, but I mean, for the man to be nearly dandering up the road now, and just going, the son lives, this is good. And so then the people are coming down the road, they're legging it, because they are excited about meeting them up, you know, and I didn't have any cell phones or anything there, cell phones.
You already knew she
mobiles.
Yes.
You know, so they come together and he hears confirmation, word for word. Your son lives. You know, that's what he heard from Jesus, and that's what he gets from those people. So that's like, here it is, 3 words that are identical. That you know, it's true. Right. So see, when you hear stuff from God, and then you hear it again, it's very, very special. I remember, again, I've told this story before, but here we go. When I was about 18 or so, I remember the Lord taught me a lot of stuff over a period of a year, and I hadn't written it down at that particular stage. I'll have to bring in my Bible from the, not this one, but I have another Bible at home that I got when I was first became a Christian. But in the back, I have notes of what I learned back in that year. And but I remember I had in my mind, you know, everything that God had taught me. It was about 10 different things. So, and they were in a particular sort of order. You know, God taught me this, that, and the other thing. And so then I went to a camp for Young Life, which was a ministry to high school kids. And I was part of the camps and all this sort of stuff. So we went to a leadership weekend at Saranac Lake, which was in upstate New York. And now they had different speakers from all over the country speaking at this event. It was quite a big event with a lot of people from, again, all over the country. And so we were all there. So all these speakers were all speaking on different topics in different seminars and all that kind of stuff. I went to all these different things. Speaker 1 spoke about the first thing that was on my list. And it was word for word what was in my mind. Went to speaker 2. He spoke on the second thing that was on my list. Word for word what was in my mind. I went through, you know, say 10 different speakers, and they were speaking on 10 different things. It was in the order that was in my mind, and it was word for word. So God was emphasizing to me, I'm speaking to you, and my word is true. I was blown clear out of the water, just sitting there going, how do these people know? Well, God told them what to say, you know. So, right. Last page here. So the nobleman then says he inquires about the timing. So he hears this, you know, believes it fully, but it's like, now this will be interesting. See how this measures up. So he inquires about the timing, and so then the servants, they say, well, it was yesterday at the 7th hour the fever left him. Now in time reckoning, again, it depends on who you read. I think the majority of people would say it's about 1 p.m. Now, that's interesting, because if the guy has a fever, usually fevers break at night, not during the day, and especially if it's hot and sticky during the day. So this is plumb in the middle of the day. So this is miraculous. This is why these sorts of details are put in here, is because the kid could have, you know, gone to bed at night, and you know, this is what happens with infections back in the old days. If you survive through them, the sort of process, and the fever breaks, and then then that's that. But oftentimes when that happens is at night, when it's cooler, not during the day.
Much hotter, yeah.
So, but the man knew then. So, well, the nobleman here, he knew that Jesus' word had power, because it was at the same time that he said, your son lives. I tell you, this nobleman, I would say, went home, got this carved on some plaque somewhere and put it up on this wall. Your son lives, it says Jesus. You know, and but what a wonderful word. You know,
Yes, and whenever the servants came in, to tell them that a son had lived, the servants didn't realize that the Nobleman.
yeah. So now, as a result of this knowledge and getting all this pulled together, then it says he believed himself, and as the Bible says, and his whole household. So he himself believed, and his whole household. So you know, so it is a very, very personal arrival that this man comes to. This is, you know, again, the Bible is using language that makes sure that it is brass tacks. This is right down to what it should be, which is you yourself need to believe. You can't believe on what other people tell you or something like this, or you can't dovetail into somebody else's belief system. Oh, well, it sounds good, so I'll do that, or whatever. No, he comes to a conclusion. That's why they say God has no grandchildren. You know, the only person that is born again of the Spirit of God and is adopted by God as a son and as a daughter. So you cannot be grandfathered into salvation. So, but this then impacts the entirety of his house. So, you know, and there's lots of this kind of precedent in the Bible. So I want you to be encouraged about your own house as you get there. So, and all of us come from houses where, you know, there's unsaved in it, and we trust the Lord for salvation to come to our house. But that's God's business. That's God's timing. You know, this household didn't come to faith until this was all finished. You know, sometimes we want to hurry it. You know, sometimes we know what's happened within ourselves. You know, we know that we've come to faith and that kind of thing. And then we want other people within our house. It's like, don't you get it? Come on, this is brilliant, you know. And
we never got it.
Yeah. So yeah, you know, and I mean, I didn't get saved until I was 11. My dad was 42. My dad was the first one to get saved, and then a couple of months later, I got saved. But my mother didn't get saved until the following spring. So because I think my mother was sort of sizing things up. It's like, all right, is this faith really sort of? Now, I think she was very attracted to it and very sort of found it very sort of interesting. But but my mother had to come to her own conclusion, and she came to faith. And I tell you, my mother, once she got saved, she was full on. So
it's nice to hear people praying for people in their family who are not saved.
yeah,
And pray saying you haven't saved them yet.
Yeah.
I like to hear that.
Yeah.
It's a very,
I like to hear that. And they're not saved.
yeah,
Yeah,
As
that,
if it's out of
yes,
control,
yeah.
looking
yeah,
for God to finish.
Mhm.
that yet I find is hope.
Yeah.
It's hope.
But you're praying with where the Bible says, you know, if you pray not expecting,
Yes.
you're been blown about all of it.
Yeah.
Expect.
So yeah, it's important to you know, pray with expectancy, but at the same time you realize the sovereignty of God in terms of His timing. Because let's think about the verse there out of Philippians 2:13. It says, "For it is God who works in you both to will and to do with His good pleasure." It's God that works. You know, we can't force it. You know, as much as we'd love to, and sometimes we end up nearly badgering people. It's like, you know, don't you get it? Don't you understand? Get saved, you know? And so, you know, and the unsaved are looking at you like, oh God, you know, so yeah, yes, you can end up driving them in the opposite direction. You know, keep on praying. You know, and I am always heartened by the story about George Mueller, the guy that did the orphanages at Bristol back in the 1850s and stuff. He prayed for a man for 64 years to get saved.
Wow.
And he knew. You know when the man got saved? At George Mueller's funeral.
Amazing.
So he didn't live to see the man saved on this side of heaven.
I always remember hearing the story, and I can't remember the names, but it was somebody who was in charge of an orphanage in England. Probably the story is very familiar to most people. And they had nothing, they were down and out, and God moved on someone who owned a bakery to get them up in the middle.
Yeah,
of
that
the
was George Mueller.
That Mueller, I
Yeah.
thought it was Mueller. And they were on their knees. He was taking stuff to them, and they were on their knees,
Yeah.
giving thanks to God for the food, and they had no food at this stage.
Mhm.
And the door rapped,
Very well.
Yeah.
and there was the food.
Yeah.
That's just a bit like
That
the.
was sending
yeah.
a shiver through your body.
Yeah.
Thinking about that, like,
Yeah, just like
I mean,
the-
I remember, and again, this is a story I told, but I just think it's a marvelous story about God's provision in Stars. We, in 2008, October 1st, Beth Williams, who worked the checks to pay bills and pay salaries and all that kind of stuff, we would be paid on, you know, that first day of the month. And she came to the office and said, "Right, boys, unless I get £3,000 today, nobody's getting paid." And so we sat down and we prayed and we says, "Lord, we believe that you're going to provide the need." Now, we didn't know how or any of that kind of stuff. We weren't writing a prescription to God and say, "Here, God, here's our solution to the thing, so you go and sort it." This man, this nobleman, he just came with his son, or the situation of his son, and just says, "Come and heal my son." And so that's what we did. We came to the Lord and says, "Lord, we're not getting paid. We need £3,000. That's the crack. So, but we'll trust you for it." Half an hour later, the post comes. One letter, one check, £3,000.
Wow.
So-
There's a lady coming to the
Oh, you touch.
short fellowship, and I remember hearing her in the one time. She, her parents sent her out to a mission and they were filming pictures, and then she wanted to do the pictures. So she decided to go over the mission, get sat in the back seat, and she'd slip out. Do you hear her wee story? No. She got pinned in somehow or other anyway, but the man then got up and was John 3:16, and she couldn't get out of the kitchen. I'm sick of hearing John 3:16, but that night she got saved. And anyway, long story short, her parents who were sending her to the Sunday school or a mission and all were actually disappointed whenever she told them she had got saved. And then she was to go to Bible study or Bible college in London, and the time was coming up and she had no money, and the father kept saying to her, "What about all this money?" She said, well, I have prayed to God, and if he wants me to go, he's going to have to do it." So she had a wee case and she headed to the boat. On the Monday he said something to her, the father, sarcastically, and she says, "I'm not going to Wednesday." As she had put her foot on the first step up to the boat, a man walked past her and gave her an envelope. And she opened the envelope and had a look at the money that was in the envelope and what was in her pocket was exactly what she needed for her care, what she did.
Amazing.
I knew who the man was.
Yeah.
Think about it.
Yeah.
And it was on and it was on and on. So I am visually impaired from words last strike coming back this Saturday for another.
You know,
I can remember hearing that woman and why I'm going from my back. Just how God works.
Yeah, and it engenders faith in you, because if you try to spin your own sort of, this is what frustrates me a little bit about certain Christian
Yeah.
agencies. They go through a lot of campaigns and money raising exercises and all that kind of stuff. And God, and I think in a sense, is going to go, "Well, yeah, last way, work away. Here you go, you did it.
Yeah.
Aren't you happy?"
Yeah.
And whereas I've been involved in missions of various descriptions where you sit, you pray, you ask the Lord, and the Lord raises things up, and you just go, "God did that."
Yeah.
And then you're left in no doubt
Yeah.
as to that's what God does.
Mhm.
So So anyway, this is the basically the conclusion of the story. So it's just, I thought today we'll just work through it slowly, you know, and look at it sort of, you know, phrase by phrase and blow by blow, but just realize what the power of Christ really is.
And by doing it that way, to like for me, sitting listening to that, you can just put yourself in that situation. You can put yourself in that crowd watching what was happening. You know, when you break it all down like that,
Yes, you're part of the story.
you're part of the story
you're in
and
there.
you understand more. It's
Yeah.
deeper.
Yeah.
It's deeper.
On the stage with you.
Yes, yeah, and I think that's very, very important to do with the scripture, because when you're engaging with it at that sort of level, you get it a lot deeper. You know, so. Well, yeah, now that's an interesting question. I mean, if I would say the servants were, because sometimes when it talks about household, we're not just talking about family here. We're talking about, yeah, all the servants that are within the greater household. So I would say that this was a big evangelistic success. You know?
Yeah.
So and
The service was going to be impacted.
well, as soon as they heard this,
Yes.
you know.
Yeah.
So because I think the man then went back to the house with the servants and says, "Look, let me tell you something
I
here.
already knew
This
this.
I already knew this, but this is how it happened." You know, and everybody's going,
Yeah.
"What?" You know. So you know, would have never heard anything like that in their life. You know, so
So when you do hear that that's a household, that can also mean servants,
Yeah.
everybody.
It's like the story of Lydia. Lydia was out on the canal and remember. They're all up in the book of Acts. There's different ones whose family gets
Yeah.